never thought I'd be the one to break. After 15 years at Meridian Marketing, I was the backbone of creative strategies, the person who could turn a failing campaign around with a single brainstorming session. My office walls were lined with industry awards, tangible proof that experience mattered. Then came Rebecca Morgan, our new creative director, barely 35 and glowing with Silicon Valley polish. The board hired her to revitalize our approach, but what they really meant was to clear out the old guard. The tension started subtly. My concepts were suddenly too traditional in meetings. Projects I'd normally lead were assigned to recent graduates with half my experience but twice my comfort with trending hashtags. Still, I adapted. I learned new platforms, studied emerging market behaviors, and even embraced the open office redesign that replaced my private space with a standing desk in the corner. But the real breaking point came during the Westridge pitch, our biggest potential client in years. I'd spent weekends researching their industry, creating a strategy that honored their 40-year history while positioning them for digital growth. The morning of the presentation, Rebecca pulled me aside. Her voice was hushed but deliberate. "James, I think we should let Zoe take the lead today." Zoe had been with us for 8 months. "The Westridge concept was my work," I replied, confusion evident in my voice. "I've been fine-tuning this pitch for weeks." Rebecca's smile never reached her eyes. "That's exactly the problem. Your approach feels dated. Westridge wants innovation, not tradition. They want to see themselves working with the future, not the past." The meaning was unmistakable. In her eyes, I wasn't just an older employee, I was a liability. The room seemed to shrink around me. Colleagues pretended not to listen, but their averted gazes said everything. I'd crossed some invisible line from experience to obsolete without even realizing it. "I see," was all I managed to say. I handed her my presentation folder and walked out, past the collaborative spaces filled with younger employees who never made eye contact, past the motivational posters about embracing change that suddenly felt like personal warnings. That night I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop. 15 years of campaigns, concepts, and connections stared back at me. I'd given this company my best years, canceled vacations for emergency pitches, missed my father's 65th birthday for a client crisis. And now I was being silently ushered toward irrelevance. The realization didn't hit me with rage. It settled with something worse. Shame. Had I really fallen behind so badly? Or was I just convenient to dismiss? My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, my longtime colleague. "Heard what happened? Meeting at Cooper's at 9? I almost declined. Talking about it would make it real. But isolation wasn't the answer either. "I'll be there," I replied. Cooper's was our unofficial refuge, a dimly lit bar untouched by trends or influencer recommendations. Daniel was waiting in our usual corner booth, 2 whiskeys already on the table. One look at his face confirmed my suspicions. The Westridge incident wasn't isolated. "She's restructuring the entire creative department," he said without preamble. 3 people over 40 were moved to accounts nobody wants. "It's not just you, James, it's systematic." I took a long sip, letting the burn distract me from the knot forming in my chest. "So what's the plan? Just accept obsolescence?" Daniel leaned forward. "No. We prove her wrong. Not with complaints, not with politics. With work they can't ignore." I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't just about keeping my job anymore. It was about preserving the dignity of expertise in a world obsessed with the new. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, empty except for the cleaning, staff finishing their rounds. I settled at my desk and opened my laptop with renewed purpose. If modern approaches were what Rebecca valued, then I would become fluent in her language without sacrificing the depth I'd cultivated over years. I spent that week in a state of focused determination. Lunch hours were devoted to webinars on emerging platforms. Evenings disappeared into case studies of campaigns that had bridged generational gaps. I reached out to former interns who had moved on to innovative startups and swallowing my pride as I asked for their insights. One of them, Eliza, seemed genuinely touched by my call. "I always respected that you valued substance over flash," she said. "That's actually rarer than you might think, especially now." Her words gave me unexpected comfort. Maybe my experience wasn't the liability Rebecca suggested, but rather a foundation that could support new structures of thought. The opportunity to test this theory came unexpectedly. A smaller client, Riverstone Breweries, was struggling with their identity as craft beer became increasingly mainstream. They'd been with Meridian since before I joined, but their account had recently been assigned to one of Rebecca's new hires, who was pushing for a complete rebrand, new logo, voice, and market position. During the internal review meeting, I listened as Caitlin, the account's new handler, presented a sleek concept that could have been for any urban-focused product. It was technically flawless but stripped of the rugged authenticity that had defined Riverstone for decades. When Rebecca asked for feedback, I spoke carefully. "The execution is impressive," I began, genuinely acknowledging Caitlin's work. "But I wonder if we're solving the right problem. Riverstone isn't struggling because they lack modernity. They're struggling because consumers can't distinguish genuine heritage from manufactured nostalgia." The room fell silent. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. "And your alternative would be?" I hadn't planned to present anything, but months of simmering frustration and recent intensive study crystallized into clarity. A hybrid approach. We maintain their core visual elements that loyal customers recognize, but we build a digital storytelling campaign around the real people and processes. Not filtered, not polished, authentically documented. We turn transparency into their competitive edge. I pulled up examples on my phone of similar approaches that had succeeded for heritage brands overseas. Rebecca studied them with an unreadable expression. "Interesting," she finally said. "Draft something by Friday." It wasn't enthusiasm, but it was an opening. That night I barely slept. By morning I had outlined not just a concept but a three-phase strategy that would gradually evolve Riverstone's presence across platforms while maintaining their identity. The work felt different, more deliberate than my previous instinct-driven approaches, but no less authentic. Daniel found me in the break room on Thursday, dark circles under his eyes matching mine. "Heard you're working on Riverstone," he said quietly. "Rebecca's been watching you, you know. After you left yesterday, she asked Caitlin if she'd be open to collaboration." "Is that good or bad?" I asked, stirring my coffee absently. "Depends on how you handle it. This could be a test to see if you can work with the new direction or if you'll resist it." I considered his words carefully. "I'm not interested in playing politics, Daniel. I just want to do good work." He sighed. "Sometimes the two are inseparable." Friday arrived with a tense anticipation. I presented my concept first, followed by Caitlin, who had revised her approach slightly but maintained her emphasis on contemporary aesthetics. When we finished, Rebecca studied both presentations in silence. "We'll move forward with a merged concept," she announced. "James's strategy with elements of Caitlin's visual direction. Work together on the final pitch for Monday." As we left the conference room, Caitlin approached me hesitantly. "I've actually never worked on a heritage brand before," she admitted. "Would you mind if I asked you some questions about their history? There's nothing in the brief about why certain elements matter to them." The request was small but significant, an acknowledgement that experience had value. For the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath me stabilize slightly. This wasn't victory, wasn't vindication, but it was a crack in the wall that had been building between generations in our office. "Let's grab coffee," I offered. "There's a story behind that Riverside logo that might give you some ideas." The Riverstone pitch was successful beyond anyone's expectations. The client specifically mentioned the balance between heritage and innovation, calling it exactly what they needed but couldn't articulate. Rebecca gave me a brief nod during the post-pitch celebration. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. It felt like a fragile truce. Over the next few weeks, something subtle shifted in the office dynamic. Caitlin began stopping by my desk with questions that went beyond professional courtesy. Other junior team members occasionally joined our conversations. I found myself in an unexpected role, not quite mentor, not quite peer, but a bridge between approaches. Then came the Nielsen account, a major consumer goods corporation looking to reposition their household cleaning brand for environmentally conscious millennials and Gen Z. The budget was substantial, the exposure enormous. Everyone knew this could be a career-defining project. I expected Rebecca to assemble her preferred team of younger creatives. Instead, she called me into her office on a Wednesday afternoon. The space was impeccably minimal. No personal photos, no mementos, just sleek functionality. "I want you to co-lead Nielsen with me," she said without preamble. Their CMO specifically mentioned the Riverstone campaign as what caught their attention. I carefully kept my expression neutral. "That's surprising." "Is it?" She leaned back in her chair. "You've been here 15 years, James. You understand consumer psychology beyond trends, but you've also demonstrated adaptability recently. The team needs both perspectives." Her words contained layers I couldn't fully decode. Was this genuine recognition or strategic positioning? Was I being valued or merely utilized? The politics Daniel had warned about seemed suddenly very present. "Thank you for the opportunity," I replied evenly. Rebecca studied me with unexpected intensity. "Can I be direct? When I came on board, I saw a department comfortable with past successes but resistant to necessary evolution. Your work was good, James, but it felt safe. I needed to create urgency." The implication hung between us. Her approach, marginalizing senior staff, creating an atmosphere of insecurity, had been deliberate, a strategy to force adaptation rather than request it. Professionally clever, personally brutal. "And now?" I asked. "Now I need integration, not disruption. Nielsen wants innovation that resonates across demographics. That requires both perspectives." As I left her office, conflicting emotions churned inside me. Professional validation mixed with lingering resentment. The opportunity was significant, but it came without apology for months of deliberate undermining. I found myself standing at an internal crossroads. Embrace this olive branch, however calculated, or hold on to justified bitterness. That evening, I called my sister Claire, who had navigated similar corporate evolutions in publishing. "She sounds like a tactical operator," Claire said after I explained the situation. "Everything's a means to an end. The question is whether her end goal aligns with your values. And if it doesn't, then decide if you can influence those goals or if you need to find a different environment." "But James," her voice softened, "don't let pride keep you from growth even if the catalyst was unnecessarily harsh." The Nielsen project officially launched the following Monday. The team was a deliberate blend of experience levels, a balance I suspected was Rebecca's attempt at modeling the integration she now claimed to value. Our first ideation session revealed the challenge immediately. Younger team members pushed for radical departures from traditional cleaning product messaging, while veterans cautioned about alienating core consumers. I found myself navigating between perspectives, translating concepts across generational divides. By session's end, we had frameworks that honored consumer loyalty while embracing emerging values. Rebecca observed more than participated, her expression thoughtful. Later that week, we worked late finalizing the creative brief. The office had emptied hours before, leaving that peculiar silence of spaces designed for collaboration suddenly devoid of voices. "You're good at this," Rebecca said unexpectedly, looking up from her laptop. "Bridging gaps." "I've had practice lately," I replied, the words carrying more weight than intended. She set her work aside, meeting my eyes directly. I know my approach wasn't gentle. The industry is transforming faster than most agencies can adapt. I was hired to accelerate that process. By making experienced people feel expendable, by creating necessary discomfort. She didn't flinch from the accusation. "Comfort is the enemy of innovation, but..." She hesitated. I may have underestimated the value of institutional knowledge. The Riverstone success made that clear. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was perhaps as close as Rebecca Morgan ever came to admitting misjudgment. In that moment, I glimpsed something beneath her calculated exterior. Someone navigating her own pressures and expectations, possibly as unsure in her position as she'd made me feel in mine. Moving forward, I said carefully, there might be approaches that create evolution without creating casualties. A ghost of a smile touched her face. That sounds like a creative challenge worthy of exploration. We returned to the brief, the tension between us not dissolved but transformed into something potentially constructive. I realized I was no longer fighting for relevance in a changing industry. Instead, I was helping shape what that change would look like, honoring experience while embracing necessary evolution. The path ahead remained uncertain, the balance fragile. But for the first time in months, I felt like a participant rather than a survivor. The Nielsen Project became our department's centerpiece over the next 2 months. We settled into a rhythm that balanced innovation with strategic caution, my experience complementing the fresh perspectives of younger team members. Rebecca and I developed an unexpected professional shorthand. She would push boundaries, I would assess foundations. The dynamic wasn't friendship, but it was functional, productive, and occasionally even rewarding. Then came the executive presentation. Nielsen's C-suite would review our campaign before full development began. Their CMO, Diane Winters, was known for brutal honesty and had rejected 3 agencies before approaching Meridian. Everyone felt the stakes. The night before, our team worked late finalizing details. Around midnight, only Rebecca and I remained, reviewing slides and rehearsing key points. The office felt different in those quiet hours. Less a battlefield of competing philosophies and more a shared space of focused intention. "Do you think we're taking enough risks?" Rebecca asked suddenly, staring at the presentation's core concept. A campaign showing real families transitioning to sustainable cleaning practices, documented authentically across platforms. I considered the question carefully. It's not about risk level. It's about meaningful differentiation. This approach respects their customers' intelligence rather than just their attention spans. She nodded slowly. Makes sense, but Diane has a reputation for wanting the spectacular. Spectacle without substance is just noise, I replied. Diane may appreciate flash, but she's built her career on sustainable growth, not viral moments. Rebecca gave me a curious look. You've worked with her before? No, I admitted. But I've studied her career. 20 years ago, she was an unknown product manager who transformed a failing bathroom cleaner into Nielsen's highest margin offering. She values substance dressed in style, not style masquerading as substance. This was the knowledge that couldn't be gleaned from trend reports or social analytics. The human patterns behind business decisions accumulated through years of observation. Rebecca's expression shifted from curiosity to something resembling respect. Sometimes I forget how much industry history lives in your head, she said quietly. The presentation began smoothly the next morning. Our team delivered each component with practiced precision. Diane and her executives listened attentively, faces unreadable. When we finished, the room fell into that particular silence that follows high-stakes presentations, everyone breathing but nobody speaking. Diane leaned forward. Your campaign is missing something, she said flatly. The air seemed to crystallize. Rebecca tensed beside me, ready to defend our work. It lacks urgency, Diane continued. Consumers understand sustainability intellectually, but most don't act until they feel immediate pressure. Show me how you'll create that pressure. Rebecca started to explain our phased rollout, but I noticed Diane's slight headshake. She wasn't asking about implementation timeline. She wanted emotional acceleration. I touched Rebecca's arm lightly, a silent request to pause. May I? I asked quietly. When she nodded, I turned to Diane. You're absolutely right, I began. Intellectual understanding without emotional urgency rarely drives behavior change. We've addressed the why, but not the why now. I described a potential addition, documenting the plastic accumulation of average families alongside their transition stories, creating visual urgency through accumulation rather than abstract statistics. Diane's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. That addresses half my concern. Now tell me how you measure success beyond sentiment and sales. The question was unexpected. Most clients focused exclusively on those metrics. This was the moment that would define the presentation, and instinctively Rebecca and I both recognized it. She glanced at me, then stepped forward. "We propose measuring actual consumption reduction," she said confidently. "Anonymous data tracking of product usage through QR activation, showing real decrease in household chemical dependency and plastic waste, not just selling differently but selling less, more effectively." It was bold, suggesting a client measure success through reduced consumption, but it aligned perfectly with Nielsen's public sustainability commitments. I watched Diane's face transform from skepticism to genuine interest. By meeting's end, we had not just approval but enthusiasm. The campaign would move forward with expanded scope and budget. As executives filed out, Diane paused beside us. "Interesting partnership," she observed quietly. "Different approaches, same destination. Keep that balance." She left before either of us could respond. Walking back to our department, Rebecca broke the silence. "That was good back there. The way you read her real question." "And your response was brilliant," I replied. "Measuring actual impact rather than just perception. That's what won her over." Rebecca smiled slightly. "Maybe we're not terrible together." The validation of our approach rippled through the office. Teams that had been fragmented by generational divisions began tentatively collaborating across experience levels. The culture wasn't transforming overnight, but small shifts were visible. Younger staff seeking input from veterans, experienced team members more open to experimental approaches. I found myself in a strange new position, neither sidelined nor spotlighted, but functioning as a connector across previously hardened boundaries. The anger that had fueled me months earlier hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had evolved into something more constructive. Determination to create a better integration than the one I'd experienced. That evening, as I packed up to leave, Daniel stopped by my desk. "You've crossed over," he said with a wry smile. "Comfortable in the brave new world?" I considered his question seriously. "Not comfortable, but not lost either. It's less about crossing over and more about building connections between shores." He nodded thoughtfully. "Just don't forget which shore you came from." His warning lingered as I headed home, raising questions I hadn't fully confronted. In finding this new equilibrium, what parts of my professional identity had I compromised? And was adaptation always progress, or sometimes just surrender in disguise? 3 weeks into production on the Nielsen campaign, disaster struck from an unexpected quarter. Our creative team had been documenting real families transitioning to sustainable practices, capturing authentic moments rather than scripted perfection. The footage was compelling, honest, relatable, occasionally awkward in the way real life tends to be. Rebecca and I were reviewing the first cut when Marcus, our legal counsel, appeared at the door. His expression conveyed the message before his words did. "We have a problem," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Nielsen's parent company just acquired GreenLife products." I felt the implications immediately. GreenLife was a direct competitor to EcoClean, one of our agency's oldest clients. The acquisition created a textbook conflict of interest. We would need to resign either Nielsen or EcoClean. There was no third option. "When did this happen?" Rebecca asked, already scrolling through news alerts on her phone. "The announcement goes public tomorrow. They gave us courtesy notice an hour ago." Rebecca's face hardened into the tactical expression I'd come to recognize, calculating moves, assessing damage, planning recovery. "Nielsen is triple the billing of EcoClean. Financially, this isn't even a question. EcoClean has been with this agency for 17 years, I said quietly, before either of us worked here." Rebecca's eyes flashed. 17 years of declining market share and conservative campaigns. Nielsen offers growth potential across their entire portfolio. The room temperature seemed to drop. Just when I Thought we'd found common ground. Old fault lines reappeared. Rebecca saw numbers and growth trajectories. I saw relationships and obligations. Both perspectives valid, both incomplete. We should take this to Lawrence, I suggested, referring to our agency president. This decision affects the entire firm. Marcus nodded agreement. Executive meeting in 30 minutes. They want you both there. The boardroom held a tension I hadn't felt since Rebecca's earliest days. Lawrence sat at the head of the table, flanked by financial officers and department heads. Rebecca and I took seats on opposite sides, an unconscious physical manifestation of our diverging perspectives. Lawrence outlined the situation clinically. Nielsen projections show $14 million in billings over 3 years. EcoClean currently generates $3.5 million annually with minimal growth. Financially, this appears straightforward. Heads nodded around the table. The decision seemed predetermined. Sacrifice the loyal smaller client for the promising larger one. Business logic, at its most ruthlessly efficient. May I speak? I asked, surprising myself with my own certainty. Lawrence nodded, though several executives exchanged glances that suggested they viewed this as a formality. EcoClean came to us during their worst financial crisis, I began. They trusted us with their rebuilding when larger agencies wouldn't touch them. For 17 years, they've approved every budget without question, paid every invoice on time, and treated our team as partners rather than vendors. Rebecca leaned forward. While that history is admirable, we have to consider... I'm not finished, I interrupted, my voice steady. The room stilled. I rarely asserted myself this directly. Nielsen selected us because of our work with Riverstone, work that demonstrated our ability to honor heritage while embracing innovation. If we discard EcoClean the moment a better offer comes along, what does that say about those values? What message does that send to other loyal clients? Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Business isn't about sentimentality, James. It's about growth and adaptation. It's about both, I countered. Trust sustains us through market fluctuations. Innovation helps us grow. We need both engines running. The CFO cleared his throat. While philosophically interesting, we have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize revenue. Short-term or long-term? I asked. Because I can name 3 clients who moved their business to us specifically because of how we treated EcoClean during their downturn. Our reputation for loyalty has tangible value. Lawrence studied me with newfound interest. What solution do you propose? I hadn't expected the question. I'd prepared to argue principles, not present alternatives. Rebecca watched me with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. We disclosed the conflict to both clients, I said, thinking aloud. We offer Nielsen our concept work completed to date, with our blessing to take it elsewhere. We explain our commitment to existing partners and suggest a graceful transition. And we offer to connect them with 3 qualified agencies who could execute our strategy effectively. The room erupted in objections. Walking away from millions in confirmed revenue seemed like madness. But Lawrence raised his hand for silence. And if Nielsen offers to buy out EcoClean's contract? To make us whole financially? Then we have a different conversation with EcoClean, I replied. One about mutual benefit rather than abandonment. To everyone's surprise, Rebecca spoke next. There's precedent for this approach. Bernbach famously declined major tobacco work despite financial pressures. It defined their agency culture for decades. Her support was unexpected. Tactical rather than emotional perhaps, but support nonetheless. Lawrence looked between us, then nodded slowly. Let me consider both perspectives. I'll make my decision by morning. Rebecca caught up with me in the hallway afterward. That was quite a performance, she said, her tone unreadable. It wasn't a performance. You really believe a company should prioritize loyalty over growth opportunity? I considered her question carefully. I believe treating relationships as disposable assets ultimately devalues everything we create. Even the most innovative work becomes just another commodity to be traded or discarded when convenient. Something flickered across her face. Not agreement exactly, but recognition. You've never been afraid to stand alone, have you? I'm not standing alone, I replied. I'm standing with principles that existed before me and will exist after me. She studied me for a long moment. Principals don't pay salaries. No, I acknowledged. But they're why some people choose to work here instead of the dozen other agencies offering comparable salaries. Rebecca didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice held an unusual hesitance. If Lawrence sides with your approach, Nielsen will walk away angry. The campaign we built will die. Yes. And you're prepared for that? All that work, all that potential just gone? The question penetrated deeper than she likely intended. Was I prepared to sacrifice something I'd helped create, something I believed in, for a principle? The answer came with surprising clarity. Some things matter more than what we create, I said finally. How we create matters too. She nodded slowly, as if cataloging this perspective for future reference. I guess we'll see which approach prevails tomorrow. As she walked away, I realized something had shifted between us. We still approached problems from fundamentally different angles, but there was a new recognition. That conviction, even when inconvenient, commanded a certain respect. Lawrence's decision came via email rather than announcement. The message arrived in my inbox at 6:43 a.m., its timestamp suggesting a sleepless night of deliberation. Its brevity belied the weight of its content. Meeting in my office, 8 a.m., bring Rebecca. I forwarded it without comment and arrived early, watching. Dawnlight transformed the city skyline from my vantage point on the 32nd floor. The agency wouldn't stir to life for another hour, leaving the space in that liminal quiet that precedes daily chaos. Rebecca arrived precisely at 7:50, impeccably dressed as always, but with subtle signs of strain around her eyes. Sleep, well? I asked. Hardly, she replied, arranging herself in the chair beside mine. You? Not really. A small silence settled between us, not entirely uncomfortable. Whatever Lawrence had decided, we'd both advocated our positions with conviction. That shared certainty created an unexpected connection, despite our opposing viewpoints. Lawrence entered precisely at 8, carrying 3 folders. He placed one before each of us, keeping the third. No pleasantries, no coffee offered. This wasn't that kind of meeting. I've made my decision, he began, his voice measured. We will not be resigning either client. Rebecca and I exchanged confused glances. With respect, she said, that's not possible. The conflict exists at the corporate level, not the brand level, Lawrence interrupted. I spoke with both CEOs last night. Nielsen's acquisition of Greenlife doesn't integrate their cleaning division until next fiscal year. That gives us approximately 9 months. I opened my folder to find a detailed transition plan. Lawrence continued as we reviewed the contents. James, your point about loyalty was well taken. Rebecca, your emphasis on growth opportunities was equally valid. I'm choosing a third path. He tapped the folders. We will complete the Nielsen campaign as contracted. Simultaneously, we will help EcoClean prepare for their next agency relationship, potentially with our satellite office in Chicago operating as a separate entity. It was an elegant solution that honored commitments while acknowledging realities, but the implications were significant. Someone would need to manage this delicate balance, ensuring neither client felt shortchanged while maintaining ethical firewalls. Who oversees this transition? Rebecca asked, voicing my unspoken question. Lawrence looked between us. Both of you jointly. Your different perspectives are precisely what's needed to navigate this properly. He stood, signaling the end of discussion. The executive team trusts your judgment. Don't make me regret this decision. After he left, Rebecca and I sat in stunned silence. The assignment was either a vote of profound confidence or an elaborate test, possibly both. So, she said finally, co-leadership of contradictory priorities with someone whose fundamental approach differs from mine. What could possibly go wrong? Despite everything, I laughed. When you put it that way, it sounds almost impossible. Almost, she agreed, a reluctant smile forming. But not entirely. We spent that day creating a management framework for the unprecedented situation. Rebecca's systems-oriented thinking complemented my relationship-focused approach. By evening, we had constructed a viable path forward, challenging but not impossible. As we finished, Rebecca studied me with newfound curiosity. Yesterday in the boardroom, that wasn't just about EcoClean, was it? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? You were also defending something about yourself. Something about what gives work meaning. Her perception was unexpectedly acute. I considered deflecting but opted for honesty instead. When you first arrived, the message seemed clear. Adapt or become irrelevant. Experience wasn't valuable unless packaged in trending formats. It felt like being told that everything I'd built my career on was obsolete. Rebecca's expression shifted to something more complicated than her usual tactical assessment. That wasn't my intention. Intentions and impacts often differ, I replied without accusation. She nodded slowly. Fair point. A pause then. For what it's worth, I've been reconsidering some of my initial approaches. Watching you fight for EcoClean reminded me why I got into this business originally. To create work that matters, not just work that performs. The admission clearly wasn't easy for her. Rebecca Morgan didn't do vulnerability as a general rule. That she offered even this small acknowledgement felt significant. Creating work that matters and performs isn't an either-or proposition, I suggested. The best work does both. Like our Nielsen campaign, she said quietly. Like our Nielsen campaign, I agreed. The following months transformed our department in ways neither of us could have predicted. Managing concurrent, conflicting priorities required unprecedented transparency with our teams. Rigid hierarchies gave way to fluid collaboration based on relevant expertise rather than position or tenure. The Nielsen work progressed with renewed energy, while our EcoClean transition planning became a masterclass in ethical client management. Rebecca and I developed an effective, if unconventional, leadership rhythm. We disagreed regularly, sometimes intensely, but always productively. Our teams watched these exchanges with initial concern that gradually transformed into appreciation. They witnessed two fundamentally different approaches finding common ground without compromise. Integration rather than capitulation. 3 months into our experiment, Lawrence called us both to his office. I expected a progress report. Instead, he slid a magazine across his desk, the industry's leading publication, open to an article titled, Meridian's Renaissance, How Generational Integration Redefining Agency Culture. Congratulations, he said simply. You've created something worth noticing. The article detailed our unlikely partnership and the cultural transformation it had sparked. Other agencies were reportedly struggling with similar generational gaps, but few had found effective bridges. As we left Lawrence's office, Rebecca turned to me. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here when I first arrived? Not even close, I admitted. I was preparing retirement plans by month 2, she laughed, and I was calculating how quickly I could replace the old guard without causing a client exodus. Her expression sobered. I'm glad I was wrong about some things. Some things? I raised an eyebrow. Don't push it, James, she replied, but her smile remained. That afternoon I found a handwritten note on my desk. Rebecca's precise handwriting was instantly recognizable. Experience without innovation grows stagnant. Innovation without experience lacks foundation. Neither succeeds alone. Thank you for the difficult lessons. I tucked the note into my desk drawer, a tangible reminder of an unexpected truth. Sometimes the most valuable growth happens at the edges of conflict, where different perspectives collide, but don't destroy each other. The advertising landscape would continue evolving. Trends would emerge, peak, and fade. Technologies would transform how we reached audiences. But the core of meaningful work, creating connection, honoring truth, building trust, remained consistent across generations. Not despite our differences, but because of them, Rebecca and I had created something neither could have built alone, a bridge between what was and what could be, strong enough to carry others across.